They only expected 300 people to show up to the promo event, but 5,000 people showed up. Only half were able to fit into the auditorium, and the line stretched for more than 2 city blocks. They had to make it a standing-only event just to increase the capacity. The cash registers were full to bursting, so they were literally dumping dollar bills on the floor, and that became a 6-foot pile by the end of the night. In these photos, you can only see a part of the crowd. You don't see the 4th floor galleries packed to bursting. When is the last time a movie, let alone a documentary, caused so much hype? Doesn't happen. But of course, this was no ordinary documentary. This was a psychological operation. This 86-minute documentary changed society forever. It kicked off a multi-billion-dollar industry that is still growing 50 years later. This documentary is the reason why there is a gym within walking distance to your home. If you think I'm exaggerating, do some research into the fitness craze of the 80s. If you made a graph of the number of gyms in the US, you would see a sharp increase after the year this movie was made. This video is for you if you're interested in business or psychological operations. I will share with you the tactics of influence that print billions. Now let's jump right into the story. As always, don't worry about spoilers. You're an adult, not a child, and besides, this is a documentary, so there's no spoilers anyway. This movie was set in 1975 in the final 100 days before the Mr. Olympia contest. We begin our journey in Gold's Gym in Venice, California, the birthplace of modern bodybuilding. During this time, rent was cheap, California was booming, and the beaches were actually clean. We step into a time machine. The hairstyles, the fashion, the way that people spoke, the gym equipment, none of this was fake. You are literally witnessing what the 70s looked like. Now, here we of course meet the star of the movie, the one and only, at the time 5-time winner of Mr. Olympia, and the future highest paid actor in the world, the future 2-time governor of California, the Austrian oak, the machine, the governator. Let's give it up for Arnold Schwarzenegger. But of course, at the time of the movie, or at least the time of the shooting, nobody outside of bodybuilding even knew who he was because they didn't even know what bodybuilding was. So yes, Arnold was king, but he was the king of like 300 people. Before pumping iron, people saw bodybuilding as some kind of a circus act. In fact, circuses had these strongman performances along with dancing bears, baton twirlers, and clowns. Bodybuilding wasn't cool, and it was seen as a literal freak show. So the bodybuilders themselves were seen as self-obsessed narcissists or pathologically insecure. In fact, people assumed that all this time and effort spent on improving the male physique, the male body, was just another form of homosexuality. To make this movie, George and Charles, who are the directors, needed Arnold specifically. It couldn't be anybody else. And that was because Arnold was the reigning champion, but also because of the presence that Arnold brought. Before pumping iron, if you're a muscular guy, people assume that you were dumb or boring. So other sports had personalities, right? If you've never watched boxing, probably heard of Muhammad Ali. If you've never watched basketball, probably heard of Michael Jordan. If you've never watched golf, you've probably heard of Tiger Woods. So these men, these personalities, were ambassadors for the sport, champions for the sport. And in the same way, bodybuilding needed a champion. And the directors believed that Arnold could be that champion for bodybuilding. He was funny, he was good looking, he was sophisticated in an interesting sort of way, and most importantly perhaps, girls loved him. And they felt that Arnold had that star power that other bodybuilders simply didn't have. In other words, Arnold was cool and he could make bodybuilding look cool, which is why they needed him specifically. But there was a catch. Arnold didn't even want to be a part of this movie. See, Arnold had retired at the time of the shooting of this movie. He had already won Mr. Olympia 5 times, so he was already acknowledged as the greatest of all time. So he had moved on. He wanted to get into Hollywood, and he had always secured his first lead role in a movie. So in fact, the director for that movie, who was a big shot, I forgot his name, but he told Arnold to cut down from his competition weight of 240 pounds down to 200. And now George Butler, the director of Pumping Iron, was asking him to come back from retirement and compete in bodybuilding again and go back from 200 pounds to 240 pounds within a matter of months. So ridiculous ask, right? So Arnold was in a tough position. Think about the risk. First, there was the obvious risk that the documentary could flop, right? All this effort for nothing. But there's also the risk that if he competed, he would lose. So instead of going out as the undefeated champion, he would go out with a damaged reputation. So there was also another threat looming. So there was a new challenger, a man even bigger than Arnold, who is the kind of the fan favorite, not fan favorite, but like people like Joe Weider, who was the organizer of bodybuilding, felt that this new guy could dethrone Arnold. And he was Lou Ferrigno. Lou Ferrigno was a monster. He was just 24 years old, but he was 6'5", weighing in at 280 pounds. He was a beast, and the only thing he wanted to do was defeat his idol, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Lou Ferrigno had won Mr. America and Mr. Universe. Now he was hungry for the big one, Mr. Olympia. And the only thing in his way was Arnold Schwarzenegger. So at this time, Arnold was way more experienced than Lou, right? He won 5 times already. But he wasn't the hungry wolf that he once was. He was the fat cat on the throne. On the other side, we have Lou, who was taller, he was bigger, he was younger, and he was 100% focused on one goal, whereas Arnold had kind of shifted his focus away from bodybuilding towards acting, right? So Arnold was the golden king, but Lou Ferrigno was the dark prince. So the drama was set up. Like, who's going to win? Is it the reigning champion or the underdog? So it's set up like a classic underdog story. We'll come back to that in a second, though. So now at the opening of the movie, the first scene, you are introduced to your psychological operation. I'll explain. So there's a tactic in psychological operations and marketing in general, which is when you take something that people don't understand and you put it on the stage with something that people do understand, you can build a bridge. So the opening scene of Pumping Iron is not a bunch of guys who are in the gym pumping iron. In fact, it is this ballet lesson. This small ballet dancer woman is teaching these giants, Franco Columbu and Arnold Schwarzenegger, how to move with grace. So think about this from a psychological perspective. What does this tell the audience? It tells the audience, look at these gentle giants. They're not freaks, they're the good guys. Look at how respectful they are to this tiny ballet woman. They're not harmful. And the sport itself isn't just a bunch of circus animals huffing and puffing on stage. It's more like a dance. There's technique, there's practice, and it's an art form. So none of this is said, right? It's communicated subconsciously, and that's what makes it so powerful. Now, you probably heard the concept of show, don't tell. Well, this movie is a masterclass in that concept. So remember how I told you this video is for entrepreneurs? This is what I mean. I'll be sharing with you marketing tactics throughout this video. George Butler's entire purpose here is not to document bodybuilding. It is to promote bodybuilding. He's a marketer, not a documentarian. For example, we have this glorious scene of Arnold goofing around in this photo shoot with these chicks. You can see that Arnold probably needs to go wipe off the back of his neck after this one, right? Girls love Arnold. Girls can't get enough of Arnold. And if you're a man watching this in the 70s, this more than anything is going to get you into the gym. This takes bodybuilding, which is seen as kind of homosexual, and turns it into something that gets you girls. Complete rebrand of an entire subculture without saying anything, without using words. That is power. So, coming back to Arnold, right? Arnold's entire lifestyle as he trains up for Mr. Olympia is to wake up, go to the gym, grab a lunch with the boys, go to the beach, get a tan, mess with the girls, and go home. That's literally it. The ultimate male fantasy, right? So that's exactly what it is, though. It is a fantasy. It's created for camera. In reality, Arnold was incredibly driven, very focused, completely consistent. His fun lifestyle has the appeal because he was a winner already. Otherwise, nobody would care. And the victories, the winnings, did not come from the photo shoots. It does not come from the time he spent with the girls. It came from the time in the gym. But that's they don't show that as much as the fun stuff. In the end, we know the truth, right? Power, victory, comes from strategy and execution. And then we go to Lou Ferrigno. In complete contrast to Arnold, Lou is never seen with girls. Lou does a photo shoot, but is with a cheetah, not a girl. And he's never lazing under the beach in California. He's in cold, dark, industrial Brooklyn, New York. His gym is claustrophobic. His roof is low. There's barely enough space to walk around. And the pressure isn't just physical, it's mental. Lou is under severe mental pressure from his father. In fact, Lou Ferrigno is introduced into the movie by his father. His father is giving him a lecture about winning and the cost it would be if he lost to Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Lou doesn't have Arnold's model-tier looks. Arnold looks like an aristocrat. Lou Ferrigno looks kind of like a Looney Tunes character. He doesn't have aura, doesn't have screen presence. He barely even speaks in the movie. And we find out why. So Lou's backstory, he had an ear infection as a baby and went deaf. So he had a terrible speech impediment, couldn't speak that well. And that's why the dad is kind of overprotective and kind of speaks for him. So it makes Lou look dumb, but Lou's not dumb. It's just that he can't speak that well. And then when we compare Arnold's and Lou's childhood photos, we see even more contrast. Even in Arnold's old photos, we see an athletic, good-looking young man. But with Louis, we see kind of a dorky, skinny-looking guy. But despite being dull in comparison to the glow of Arnold Schwarzenegger, we warm up to Lou. He's relatable. He's a big guy, but he's soft at heart. And because we like Lou, we start to root for him. So when his dad is constantly picking at him and lecturing him and just like finding out the smallest flaws in his posing routine, we start to feel anger at the dad. We feel like the dad is actually hurting Lou's chances. Like, who is this guy anyway? His dad's an ex-cop, not an ex-bodybuilder. So what gives him the credibility or authority to train Lou? It feels like Lou's biggest enemy isn't even Arnold, it's just his own father, which is another interesting drama element to this movie, right? But keep this in mind, because I'm going to share with you something about this dynamic which will blow your mind, especially if you've already watched Pumping Iron in the past. And if you haven't, well, if you watch it, you'll still be mind blown. So rep after rep, we get closer and closer to the big day in South Africa, Pretoria, South Africa, and the pressure is building. And Arnold, of course, it's different for him because he's been here before. He has won. He hasn't been to Mr. Olympia 5 times. He has won Mr. Olympia 5 times. And here's the thing. He has confidence because he has a secret weapon. So Arnold knows that at this high level, right, all the contestants have phenomenal work ethic. They have the nutrition, they have the genetics, they have the training, they have the supplements, whatever, right? But there's something else. Stage presence. And you can't get stage presence by pumping iron. There's no charisma supplements. You can't do reps in aura. And the thing is, this is an official part of your score, but nobody was focusing on this. Again, strategy, right? What is strategy? Strategy is the allocation of scarce resources in a way to improve your outcomes of winning favorably, right? So everybody was focusing on the things which they knew they had control over. But Arnold was focusing on the one thing which nobody else was focusing on, which gave him a distinct edge. So what did he do, right? What did he spend his scarce resources? Now, what do I mean by scarce resources? In this case, I mean time. So Arnold, unlike the others, practiced an hour or more of meditation per day. They don't tell you about this in the documentary. You only know if you read Arnold's biography called Total Recall. Now, I believed that this extra hour or two of meditation per day allowed him to master his own psychology so that others couldn't fluster him. That is, meditation acted as a psychic shield for him, but it also allowed him to go on the offensive. So he could attack people psychologically without taking psychological damage. So think about this, right? Arnold has 24 hours per day. He could have used that extra hour on pumping more iron, or sleeping, or eating, but he chose to use it on meditation. This is a strategic play. This is a conversation about prioritization. He prioritized the charisma and mindfulness aspect while nobody else did, which allowed him to have this unique advantage. Anyway, this video is not about strategy. I will make more strategic videos in the future, but that's not the topic of this video, right? We're talking about Arnold here, talking about bodybuilding. So Arnold would use subtle questions and innocent sounding remarks to place the seeds of doubt in the mind of his competition. You'll see what I mean if you watch the movie. So the question is, of course, did all this psychological warfare actually work? Well, Lou Ferrigno did not win. He didn't even place second. He placed third. Arnold, of course, came first, winning Mr. Olympia for the 6th time in a row. He'd actually win 7 times, so he would win a future Mr. Olympia as well. And that has his own story, but we won't get into that for now. So did Lou Ferrigno lose because of Arnold's psychological tactics, or was he going to lose anyway? So right before Lou Ferrigno goes on stage, his dad actually comes up to him and says, "Don't show your back too much. It looks like you have wrinkles." Now, when I watched this movie, right, I was thinking, like, what a dick. Like, imagine the psychological blow that would be. You're getting out there in front of hundreds of people to be judged for your physique, and your dad comes and tells you this. Well, you will lose confidence. So who was the master manipulator? Was it the charismatic champion Arnold, or was it the dad? The answer to that question is neither. The psychological operation was conducted by George Butler, the director, because believe it or not, the dad character was actually 100% constructed, fictional. In reality, Lou Ferrigno was not trained by his dad at all. The man portrayed in the movie as Lou's father was in fact Lou's father, like biologically speaking, but he was not his trainer. That was completely constructed. Lou had professional trainers train him just like Arnold did. So the training was real, the competition was real, the judging was real, the feeling of defeat on Lou Ferrigno's face is real, and the feeling of triumph on Arnold's face is also equally real. But the story arc was 100% fabricated. And this is the reason why I say this was one of the most successful psychological operations done by an independent director ever. So psychological operations, as per this example, aren't necessarily evil, right? They're just tools for societal change, good or evil. The stuff I will teach you in this video and future videos will help protect you from psychological operations, but also help you do psychological operations off your own if you so chose. I just ask that you use it for good. Now that you know the story of the movie, I want to tell you the story behind the movie. And this is where you're going to get the real value of watching this video. I would have loved to cut to this part of the video, but without the context which I gave you in the past 10 minutes or so, you wouldn't have gotten it. So now you're ready to receive the meat and potatoes, right? The meat and potatoes of this video starts now. So to make this movie, George Butler and his crew shot more than 100 hours of footage. Think about that. 100 hours. And that too, this was an old school film reel, which means that you had to physically store it, transport it, and to rewatch you had to have this machinery, and to edit it was even bigger pain, right? And guess how much of this raw footage actually made it into the full, like the final cut of the movie, right? Less than 2%, just 86 minutes. So all this time and effort to shoot 100 hours of footage, but only 2% gets used. Think of the sacrifice. Think of the time, effort, skill that went into this project. Well, that is what it takes to make something historic, right? Something great. When George Butler, the director, was raising funds for this movie, he was turned down by everybody. He was turned down by more than 3,000 investors. Can you imagine getting rejected by 3,000 people and not giving up? Investors hated the idea. They felt that there was no demand for this concept and that George Butler, a first-time director, simply didn't have the skill to pull this off. So money was always in short supply. In fact, after finishing the shooting in South Africa after the Mr. Olympia contest, the director didn't even have he didn't even have money to ship the camera equipment back to New York. The movie, after this, sat unfinished for years before they had the funds to finish it. So imagine working so hard on a project, going to massive debt, showing all these people who told you no, that you could generate the money to create this thing, but then at the end it still gets shelved, and then too you don't give up, you still raise the funds and you finish the project. Remarkable. This is the meat and potatoes, right? This is the thing which I want to convey to you. Not the story of Pumping Iron, but the story of how the movie was made in the first place. I feel like that is even more remarkable. And so I give this story to you to serve as fuel when life gets tough for you, because it has been tough for others who have succeeded before you. So it is only then, after 2 years of having this movie sit in production hell, that George had this idea to do this publicity stunt, which I talked about at the start of this video. And this publicity stunt is what brought the cash to finish the video, actually. So I'm in awe of the resilience of the men behind this project. And this is the true topic of this video. To everybody else looking in, Pumping Iron was an overnight success. 3,000 investors turned him down, but now they were rolling out the red carpet for him at the Cannes Film Festival. It takes years to build an overnight success. So George Butler went on a crusade to make bodybuilding culturally acceptable. And in that pursuit, he changed society forever. And this was his first movie ever. After this movie, he actually did another movie called, I forgot what it's called, but it's about the voyage of Shackleton. And that's an amazing story. Different topic, different day, right? So he risked everything. He poured his savings into this project and maxed out his credit cards to make it happen. He was $35,000 in credit card debt. Now, this sounds like a lot, right? You don't want to go in $35,000 for a debt, but it's actually much worse than you realize, because this was $35,000 in 1970s cash, right? If I converted it, I converted $35,000 to today's currency, and it's actually $200,000 in debt. So this teaches us two things. First, our currency is massively inflated, but also that George Butler had the balls to invest in himself and his dream. And that is a model for us to follow. So not only was he a first-time director, but the technique that he used was brand new, because the technology was brand new. He used something called the 60mm camera, which was a new technology, which is what allowed him to follow the characters in the movie around. And so he was taking a bet financially, of course, like we discussed, but also on his own ability to follow through. So This is what I mean when I say, when strategy meets execution, success is guaranteed. The entire purpose of this video you're watching right now is to show you what it takes to make your dreams a reality. I'm sharing the stories of Arnold and George Butler to serve as a model for your own actions. This is not an entertainment piece. This is an education piece. The difference between entertainment and education is that education causes a behavior change. This is the whole point. If you watch this whole video and you change nothing, then this would have just been entertainment. So let's flip it and make this about you. We're pretty close to the end of this year. When this year started, there were probably some goals that you set for yourself, some promises that you made. You probably had a vision for the kind of person that you wanted to become. Right now is the perfect time to sit down with a pen and paper and think to yourself if you made progress. If you aren't happy with the progress, then that's bad news because you're never getting this time back. But it's also good news because we are a few months from the end of the year and you have enough time to turn the ship around. If you really commit, you can make this year the best year of your life. Now, coming back to Arnold, the filming of Pumping Iron concluded in 1975, but it was released only in 1977. So for 2 years, this movie sat in a storehouse. All that footage couldn't be cut up and processed because that takes a lot of money, and the directors were flat broke. They were like in debt broke. So George Butler had gotten this far with his dream project, and now it was stuck. And then he had this crazy idea, like literally history-altering idea, right? He would throw a publicity stunt. And this was his Hail Mary. This was all or nothing. Like he gassed everything. He spent everything. And this was the legendary promo event that I talked off at the starting of this video. So you already know that it's going to be a success. But I want to dissect this because if you want to be in business, if you're an entrepreneur, or if you want to have influence over the society that you live in, this is like chef's kiss tier of influence, right? So let me tell you about the George Butler event. George Butler contacted the Whitney Museum of Art, who decided to host this event. The idea was to compare bodybuilding to Renaissance sculpture, and 3 legends would perform that day. Arnold Schwarzenegger, of course, but also the master of posing, Ed Corney, and the god of proportion, Frank Zane. They would not be doing a standard bodybuilding show, but instead they would be presented as art installations. They'd be posing atop a turntable, literally like a marble sculpture. So they were displayed alongside actual displays of art by the Grand Masters. Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Rodin would be displayed alongside with them for comparison. The event was promoted as an art exhibition of artists living in their own creations. So essentially, just as a sculptor sculpts marble sculpture out of a marble block, they were saying that bodybuilders were sculpting their bodies out of the human form. The top art historians in the world were invited to host a panel of discussion on the nature of bodybuilding as art, and of course the nature of art itself. How wonderful must it have been to be a part of this? If you look at the photos of the event, you'll see people sitting on the floor, standing up, just happy to be a part of it. When is the last time a cultural event like this even happened? Nobody has their phones out because, well, it was the 70s, right? There was no smartphones. Nobody's recording or live streaming. Everybody is in the moment, learning something from the experts in real time. After the posing, the bodybuilders were invited to get clothed up and participate in a debate featuring these best minds in art. Most of the art critics were actually very supportive of bodybuilding, but one of them was not. He tried to dunk on bodybuilders by saying that the pursuit of physical perfection was comparable to Nazism. Maybe this guy didn't expect the bodybuilders to be able to debate him, considering that the general stereotype of bodybuilders was that they were dumb. But let's review who was on stage. We had Ed Corney, who was a successful businessman from Hawaii, which is where I am right now. We had Frank Zane, who was a legit mathematics and chemistry professor, and we had Arnold, who would be the future governor. So these 3 men were more than well armed for intellectual combat. They exemplified the legendary archetype of the warrior scholar. And of course, the eggheads were no match for these. Imagine being that art critic. Your entire life is spent thinking about art, and you get physically and intellectually mogged in public by a bunch of big muscly boys. But that's exactly what happened. Frank Zane especially was able to carry the show intellectually for the bodybuilders. So from this point on, funding was no longer the issue. The event was a massive success. They made all the money they could possibly have hoped for from a promotional event. And of course, the publicity itself was a huge momentum booster for the project, right? Sadly, however, this event can never be recreated again because first off, the top bodybuilders of the modern era don't even look like art pieces anymore. They look like rotisserie chicken. And then, of course, we never will have another Arnold, another Ed Corney, another Frank Zane. It's not going to happen. So this event wasn't just once in a lifetime. It was genuinely once in the history of mankind. And so we reach the end of the story of pumping iron. But not, I think, the end of Schwarzenegger. Unknown to Arnold, there was a girl in this named Maria who was watching. She had seen Arnold's face and physique on the magazines that her security detail read. Yes, so this girl Maria had a security detail because she was Maria Shriver, daughter to Sergeant Shriver, the ambassador to France, and her mother was Eunice Shriver. Eunice Shriver's maiden name was Eunice Kennedy, sister of the former President John F. Kennedy. So Maria Shriver was basically a modern-day princess in terms of the wealth and connections that she had. Within months, she and Arnold would meet and start dating, and within a few years, they'd get married. All from this movie that Arnold decided to take a chance on. Not bad. So at this point, we could say that, well, Arnold was a born winner. We could say that Arnold had won the genetic lottery. He had the height, he had the muscle insertions, and he had a handsome face. If I asked you if you would want Arnold's genetics, you might say yes. But here's the catch. Arnold had a genetic heart defect. His mother died to this heart defect. He himself had 2 major surgeries to prevent heart failure. So knowing this, if I asked you the same question, would you want Arnold's genetics? You probably think about it, right? So my point here, which I'm trying to make, is that Arnold was not genetically perfect. Far from it. Seriously flawed genetically. I shared this story to show you that nobody on this entire planet has it easy. Everybody's working through something. Just as there's no such thing as an overnight success, there's no such thing as a born winner. Winners are made, not born. Winners are made in the trenches, boys and girls. They are made in the gym, they're made on the track, they're made at the keyboard, doing coding, doing, YouTube videos, doing whatever, right? They're made on the stage, they're made off the stage. Concepts like overnight success or being born lucky are cop-outs for losers. Erase those concepts from your brain and replace them with this formula. Power equals strategy plus execution. And that is all that Arnold really did. He had a strategy to win and he executed on it superbly. Same with George Butler, right? He had a strategy to win and he executed to the best of his abilities. So there we go. That's power. That's how victory is generated. So coming back to Mr. Olympia, coming back to Arnold, coming back to pumping iron, while he was prepping for Mr. Olympia, Arnold somehow had the time and energy to build an entire construction company with Franco Colombo. There are walls and chimneys in California that stand to this day that Arnold and Franco built with their own 2 hands. This is a part of Arnold's legacy just as much as the movies, the bodybuilding, and the politics. He also had a real estate company. He owned an entire apartment building before he became a star in Hollywood and did Conan the Barbarian. And all this coming from Austria after the Allies had bombed Dresden into an ashtray and the Soviets were knee-deep in basically German blood. His mother would literally have to scavenge for days for food. So to think that Arnold was born lucky is absolute foolishness, is a fallacy of the highest order. So not only did Arnold have faulty genetics, he was also born into an absolute worst time to be alive in Europe, right? So Arnold did not have the perfect starting conditions. But despite this, Arnold's success is undeniable. In fact, there's even more facts that I could say, but of course this video would be way too long. I'll give you one fun fact though. Do you know that Arnold created the Hummer? So when Arnold saw the Army Humvee, he loved the aesthetics so much that he contacted the military manufacturer to get one. Now when they didn't sell him one, they didn't have a civilian version, Arnold helped them create it and then publicize it and then sell it. So the Hummer was actually co-invented by Arnold. In any case, he did not, of course, achieve any of this on his own. And Arnold would be the first to tell you that. He only got to where he was because people took chances on him. Joe Weider sponsored Arnold to come to the US, even though Arnold didn't even know English at the time. Then George Butler took the bet on Arnold for pumping iron. And then John Milius took the bet on Arnold to make Conan the Barbarian. So Arnold did not become a star in a vacuum, and nor can you, nor can anybody. I told you earlier that I was doing a giveaway of 1 year with my health and strategy team. The grand prize winner gets this life-changing asset for free, and then 3 second place winners get 3 months of this for free. 10 third place winners get to talk to me live on YouTube, and finally, every single applicant gets a secret prize, I won't tell you what it is, worth hundreds of dollars for free. So you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. This is your reminder to take action. Go to the link in the pinned comment and take action. I'm looking forward to reading your application.